I just want to go back to sleep. Oh, caffeine.
Hi guys, I'm Elizabeth Trent, and I decided for this research project to look into sleep deprivation in teens, such as yourself and myself. As you can see on this graph, it shows the average amount of hours that different students will get through different generations. In the 1940s, people would get 9 hours of sleep as a student for the average. In the 1990s, this dropped down to 7 hours as things became a little bit more busy. And then 2000s and up till now, the average for students is only 6 hours or less. And actually, with my experience and knowing my friends very well, I've learned that our schedules kind of go more like this. You know, in the summer, we have these 8 hours of, catch up sleep, perfect time. And in the school days, we drop down to that 6 hour average mark. Everything that gets reported, that's kind of that stuff. Now, what we don't like to share to all those fun little quizzes and reports that we sometimes give teachers or school psychologists is that during the midterms and the finals week, our sleep sometimes goes down a little bit to 4 hours. And of course, there are those due dates and deadlines where we get those occasional 3 hours of sleep. It's practically pulling an all-nighter. There's not really a point in going to bed at that point.
Doctors say teenagers need 8 to 10 hours of sleep each night, but according to the National Sleep Foundation, 87% of high school students don't get that much. That impairs their judgment and concentration and can cause anxiety, depression, and even thoughts of suicide. The American Academy of Pediatrics calls the problem of tired teens an epidemic.
If we had told you that teenagers did not get enough food, we'd have telethons, it'd be national news, it'd be covered in the presidential campaign.
A new study suggests teens are more sleep deprived than ever before. U.S. researchers investigated the sleep patterns of 270,000 adolescents since 1991. They found sleep duration has dropped for all children and that girls are more likely than boys to get less than 7 hours of sleep a night. Experts generally recommend 9 or 10 hours of sleep for teens. Over half of 15 to 19-year-olds surveyed in 2012 said they didn't even get 7 hours each night.
In this next video, you'll see an example of just someone understanding and noting that this is a real thing.
Found yourself nodding off during class or feeling like you might fall asleep?
Pretty much every day. I'm pretty much exhausted by 2:30 every single day.
Do you notice people are talking about being tired?
Yeah, people talk about how exhausted they are, how late they went to bed.
Now, I view a student's focus through a few different lenses. They have school, outside of school, and sleep. I'll go through these. So in school they have a lot of courses. They have to go to school 8 hours a day, plus do study time in there, do AP honors. They have volunteer hours. They have to do clubs, they have to do sports. There's no end to what you have to do in school. When you look onto the idea of what you have to do after school, you might have a religious activity. You have family time that you have to get through. You have to apply for college, as I know many people that are going to be watching this video are going to be seniors next year. Yeah, we have to apply for college this year, so good luck. And our last little circle that I was talking about, sleep, yeah, that's the tiniest one out of all of them, because that's what we think we can substitute with work. We think we can push it out of the way and say, oh, I don't need sleep. I can just work the whole night. We can't. And I can show you some consequences to it being that way. So right here we have some consequences from not getting enough sleep in a regular adolescent schedule. They become unfocused, tired, they have uncontrollable emotions, They're slower to think, and they're slower to recall things and to remember things and learn new things. But there are reasons for this. If we look right here, the brain's going to be unrefreshed if it doesn't have, the full recommended 9 to 10 hours of sleep that a teenager should have. And when you don't get enough sleep, we get 6 or less hours, we have brain cells that actually can die because of this, and then our brain does not get that chance to just recharge every night and refresh and be polished for the next day. And so what happens often in that 6-hour schedules that we're sleeping is that we have a hyperactive amygdala in our brain at that 6-hour mark or just under that. So when we wake up, our emotion center in our brain is flying all different colors all over the sky. It's just active like no tomorrow. And of course then we wake up and it's like supercharged. Now, the reason that we can't control these emotions and we think a little bit slower is because the prefrontal cortex in the brain, that is not polished off yet. Let's say it needed an update at, 8 in the morning. Well, our school starts at 7:20. It just doesn't have the time to do that. So that's a big problem for teenagers at the moment. And this creates a lot of backlash and a terrible cycle later on. And so what this does is when you can't recall and learn the new things that you need to in school, is it slows your growth process and learning, and it slows this time where, you could get a concept quicker in class and you may not have to study as long outside of class, but when you have this slower cognitive process, it slows everything down.
But waking up early to get to school on time cuts off their deepest and most productive hours of sleep.
How many of you have skipped sleep to do homework?
Nora learned those lost hours are crucial to her success.
And you personally might think, as just an Olentangy student, as someone from this Olentangy district with a lot of pressure, you might think, oh, I still get good grades and we're still in a really, competitive place. And you might think that you're fine. But a big leading cause for a lot of car crashes, especially in teens and in people in general, is that they're overtired and that they're exhausted. And so they have dangers of getting, they have dangers that they have to be aware of, and dangers that they don't need to risk, but often these could be avoided. And here we have a vicious cycle. So I call this a cycle of no sleep. Let's say you start with a deadline and you get no sleep that night. The next morning, you're going to be moody and irritable. And that moody and irritableness is going to put pressure on you to do stuff the next day, complete it quicker. And pressure is usually good. And pressure for a lot of students in the Olentangy district means they're pushing each other and themselves to do the best they can and to promote themselves and bump up to another level. But when this pressure is paired with no sleep, you get to this point of stress in your life, and this stress leads to, another lack of night of sleep. And that leads to another and another, and by the end of the week, you've only had a few hours of sleep. And so what students want is, we want all of this gone. We don't want the stress. We don't want to have sleep deprivation. And trust me, we don't like being moody either. But we want this pressure to do our best. We want that to continue. So how do we fix this? Well, we need people like the school to accommodate for a teen's circadian rhythm. And a circadian rhythm means that teens are naturally going to go to bed later and wake up later as well. It's their biological clock that's internal in their mind, and it will change throughout their life. But as teenagers, they do stay up later and they wake up later. It's just a natural thing. And schools, upon finding this kind of stuff, they have to take into account these things. The Olentangy district itself is actually looking into this right now, and I think that's a really important thing for us to see. We also need people to know, people like you and me, students, teachers, parents, to know and understand the dangers of sleep deprivation, as well as understand the benefits of getting a full night's of rest, because there's a lot that we could miss out on from just a few hours.
just because you can get by does not mean you're at your best. You could put low-octane gas into your sports car. The car still functions, but it's not performing at its full potential.
Research has found that when kids become teenagers, their circadian rhythm, or internal biological clock, shifts to a later time, making them biologically inclined to fall asleep about 2 hours later than they used to.
Can we make sure all cell phones are off?
All right, and here's a video talking about people that are trying to get the word out and trying to understand how great sleep is and what it can do for you.
There's an actual biological clock.
At her high school in Menlo Park, students from Stanford are training teens like Nora to become sleep ambassadors, hoping they will give their fellow students a wake-up call on the importance of falling asleep. For CBS This Morning, Ben Tracy, Menlo Park, California.
In this short clip, you'll see the idea of how emotions are changed throughout sleep deprivation and how emotions could definitely be more stable when we have adequate sleep.
8 hours without sleep. That's 7.5 days. So what exactly happens to your body when you're deprived of sleep?
So sleep deprivation has been equated to being drunk. One of the first things we start noticing right away is that our reaction times get longer. So in a sense, our brain becomes slower. We will become more short-tempered, more irritable. With even more extreme forms of sleep deprivation, we may start hallucinating.
According to the Senate report, at least 5 detainees experienced hallucinations, including Arsala Khan, who at the time was suspected of helping bin Laden escape U.S. forces, a charge that later proved false. After 56 hours of deprivation, he had visions of his family being mauled and killed by dogs, and that's not uncommon.
And here's a big question that I've had throughout this research project, and that, I still kind of want an answer, and I want a solution for this. So if we have all of these advantages that generations before us have not had, what good are we doing if we can't even apply ourselves fully as students? If we're too slow to process things because we stayed up too late the night before and we had to wake up too early for school, well, we're wasting our time at certain points, and we're wasting resources at certain points. Imagine how far we could get to make a better tomorrow, to make a better today, and imagine how great the next generation would be if we can fully apply ourselves and be our best every day, putting our best foot forward.
So how quickly can you solve it, though, Andrea? Is it just getting a few extra, minutes of sleep? Do you need to build up your sleep? How do you fix it?
The researchers at Berkeley actually who did some of this neuroimaging studies found that, this hyperreactivity in the amygdala starts to happen at, less than 6.5 hours of sleep. So it's not, we're not talking about, just getting through, an all-nighter or 3 or 4 hours. I mean, this is, pretty, many people get that amount of sleep. I mean, the experts say that 7 to 9 hours of sleep is what a healthy adult needs. And but the numbers crunched by the CDC have shown that 1/3 of American adults get less than that, and that about 12% get only 5 hours of sleep or less. So this is something that a lot of us are definitely ignoring.
Okay.
Now, to counter this issue, the school can do a few things. They can start a little bit later. That can help teens to wake up at their usual circadian rhythm, which happens to be later in the morning. They can also incorporate homework and clubs into the school hours. Now, this has been proven to work around the world in many places, especially Asian cultures, and it helps to get more things done during school hours and promote other efficient tasks outside of school hours. Now, what students can do is they can just set up schedules and have a good discipline for them. So certain times they go to school, and certain times they do sports, homework, and extra activities. Paired with a later starting time, they get a more natural sleep cycle fit in.
I think the most important thing we can do is just to be aware of our sleep. It's amazing how many people think they're getting 6 or 7 hours of sleep at night, but they're falling under that 6-hour window. So anything you can use to track your sleep in sort of in a realistic way can be very helpful to have a very clear perception of your sleep and not make the mistake when your wife says, sure, go out with all of your friends from medical school and stay out all night and leave me with the children all weekend. You don't perceive that as actually her wanting you to do that. You understand very clearly that this is not a good idea. You do not want to do that, so don't make the mistake.
That's right.